People often make the self-deprecating comment, well, I'm no saint, especially when they are comparing themselves to other people. But to that comment, I'm no saint, I would ask you tonight to think again. Because that's exactly how God sees us and what God calls us to be. Today is actually and always has been my favorite holy day. The reason I say that is because I think we can all celebrate the many saints that we have met in our lives who are not canonized. Those famous saints like St. Francis and, St. Paul and all the apostles and so on and so forth, they have their individual dates throughout the liturgical year on the church's calendar. But today is for everyone else. And that means not only those that we have met, but it has to do with you and me. If you look up the word saint, it says a person of great holiness. And what is holiness and what is holy? To desire and to possess God, and ultimately to become united with God in love. Today we read Jesus' blueprint for holiness and sainthood. The Beatitudes are so much more than the commandments, which most of us learned from childhood. And few, if many people at all, have all 8 Beatitudes memorized. It's not about do's and don'ts like the commandments, but it's really about what is our approach to life. How do we live life? What are the attitudes that form us and who we are? It's about that first beatitude. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. That's what it's all about. Knowing that we need God in all different times of our lives, all different emotions, all different instances. And the great thing about the Beatitudes is that they speak about the world today and our existence tomorrow. It's about the already and the not yet. And so some of it applies to our lives today. Other things are about our ultimate destiny with God in eternity. But even if you believe that, even if you know that it's about relying on God, and even if you try to live that, it doesn't mean that we'll do that perfectly. And I think that's the problem that so many people have. They think of sainthood and perfection. And it's not about that. Sainthood and holiness, that's very different. Every saint that we consider to be famous and that we look up to was also a sinner, some more than others. The apostles, St. Paul, who persecuted people, put them to death, the great builder of the church, and every other saint that we could think of. But what we do share with all those saints could be heard in today's second reading from 1 John. It says, we are God's children now. Not when we get to heaven, now. What we shall later be has not yet come to light, because the world does not recognize Jesus, doesn't know who he is. And it doesn't mean that they never heard of him, but that so many people, even in our approach to Jesus and who he is, we have kind of a disjointed approach. We think of this, again, somebody who had no issues, no problems. He's God, and yet he is persecuted. He was put to death. He was ridiculed. He was ostracized. and so on and so forth. And so in our world, that stuff happens to us. The thing that I love about that second reading and saying that we're God's children now, we think about all those fortunate enough to have children. Are any of our children perfect? Do you wait for them to be perfect before you love them? If we can do that, then how much more can God love us? Once we rely on God, then we can do what the Beatitudes invite us to do, which is to enter fully into life. All different times of our lives. And so, blessed or happy, in another translation, are they who mourn. Sounds like a total contradiction, oxymoron. We're happy, we're mourning. We're happy because we have loved enough to feel loss and to mourn. And so it is with all of the Beatitudes, calling us to meekness, even as we love ourselves, to be humble in that love, to not need to kind of call attention to ourselves or shine a light on ourselves. It asks us to hunger and thirst for righteousness, for what is right. Not just, oh, yeah, I'd like it to be right. Hunger and thirst to make the world more right, to make all the injustices corrected. Not to say that we can ever reach that, but that's part of the call, is to do something about that, to be about that. To be single-hearted, meaning focused on God, God first, before all others. Because we're all imperfect, we give out mercy because we need mercy. And so God asks us to be tolerant and forgiving and understanding, and that we will receive those same things from our God. That we're not merely peacekeepers, which can be a very passive thing. I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to keep the peace. That many times is sin in of itself. But to be a peacemaker, to create peace, not discord, to make people's lives a more peaceful thing as opposed to disrupting them. And to stand up for what we believe, no matter how unpopular that might be. We might not be persecuted to death in our culture, in our society, in the country that we live in, but it doesn't mean at times that religion is the most popular thing. And so it calls us to that, to be able to stand up for what we believe. Bishop Morneau, retired Bishop of Green Bay, Wisconsin, retired about 7 years ago. Great poet and writer. And many, many years ago, I became acquainted with him through a priest of our archdiocese. And so much so that he even invited me to come to Green Bay and offered me a job out there. And as much as it was very appealing, and as much as I really would have loved to work under a man like that, all I had to think about is the winters in Green Bay, and that was not going to happen. And so I didn't go there. But he writes the following, and I quote him. When all the many avenues to discover the meaning of life have been considered and explored, the pursuit of power and wealth, the desire for knowledge and control, the hunger for sensual fulfillment and pleasurement, the drama of success and fame, and all these have been found wanting, we are drawn back to that simple and profound Christian call to holiness and sainthood. Before you ever think of saying those words, I'm no saint, think again.